Today our lessons are going to be about markets in action. We're going to show you how we teach supply and demand and markets to our high school programs. We only have a week with the students, and we cover a lot of economic concepts, and we do markets in a 2-hour block. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. We'd like to take a minute to meet you guys. And so if you would, in the chat, just put where you're joining us from. All right, I see Fort Collins, New York, Virginia, Canada, Colorado, all right, Michigan, Florida, New Jersey, Illinois, Sacramento, Tennessee, the Tennessee border, Michigan, North Carolina, Toronto, Nevada. Good to see all of you. Welcome. Okay, let's do another check-in to see who we have here today. Let's practice using the video button, turning our video on and off. And so if you are a middle school teacher, keep your video on. Everybody else turn your video off.
Yeah, I haven't missed it.
All right, there's our middle school teachers who float to the top with their video on. Welcome, middle school teachers. All right, now high school teachers, turn your cameras on, and everyone else turn your cameras off. There's all our high school teachers. Welcome. Kristen can keep her camera on the whole time. She teaches middle and high school. Okay, all right. If you teach something other than middle or high school, maybe you teach college or elementary, go ahead and turn your cameras on. Everybody else turn your cameras off. Just a few of you. All right, welcome to you guys. All right, and now everybody go ahead and turn your cameras on. We're going to practice this time with reactions. If you look at the bottom of your Zoom window, it says react, and when you click on it, you'll see a thumbs up, clapping hands. You could rate. This is where you can raise your hand. So you could do a little celebration, confetti. So what I want you to do is I want you to react if you are on Eastern time. If you're from the East Coast, Eastern time, go ahead and show us a reaction. Okay, lots of East Coast folks. Let's see if you're in Central time. Go ahead and show us a reaction. Central time. Just a couple. Okay, how about Mountain time? Anybody from Mountain time? Part of the year I'm on Mountain time. We don't change. All right, and let's see everybody from the Pacific time on the West Coast. Go ahead and raise your hand. All right, good job. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen, and we'll get everybody logged into Pear Deck. All right, so I want you can either do this on another tab on your computer, or you can use your phone if you want to have more real estate, you want to keep your computer screen for the Zoom call. But you're going to take your phone, whether your phone or your other browser, and you're going to go up into the browser and type joinpd.com. PD stands for Pear Deck. Joinpd.com. My chat opened up. I'll put it in the chat as well. Joinpd.com. And then once you get there, it's going to ask for a code, and you're going to use the code that you see on my shared screen here. JGEUHH. The space isn't required. You guys are fast. I see 24 of you already connected. 9. Give you just a second to connect. You're going to connect to these slides because we're going to have, it's going to be interactive today when we're learning about supply and demand, and you'll be able to interact on the slides that I'm sharing. If you need help connecting, you can message to Debbie Davis in the chat and she can help you connect. All right, I see 29 of you connected. Means we're still missing a couple. I'm going to go ahead and close this, and you'll notice in the top right corner of my screen, those letters are still there. So you'll go to joinpd.com and enter those letters at the top right corner of my screen if you're not connected yet. So these lessons come from our program that we call Economics for Leaders. We run a summer camp every summer. We run 20 plus of these programs all around the country at different college campuses, and students, high school students come and they learn about economics and leadership for the week. And so in the mornings, they're getting all their econ instruction, and in the afternoons, they do leadership sessions. And it's a lot of fun. It doesn't sound like fun, econ camp, but the kids love it, and it's a great experience. And so they get a lot of econ in just that 1 week. And we have these economic reasoning propositions that we frame that week around. And this is economic reasoning proposition number 3, that people respond to incentives in predictable ways. Our choices are influenced by incentives, which can be rewards, they can be punishments, and that encourage or discourage our actions. And when incentives change, we change our behavior in predictable ways. In markets, we're going to talk a lot about prices, and prices are a powerful incentive. So if you've had any kind of intro to economics before, I know some of you teach economics, one of the first things we learn about is called scarcity. And that's the fact that there's more things, there's more wants and needs than there are resources with which to fulfill those wants and needs. And because of scarcity, we have to make choices. We have to allocate. We have to decide, what are we going to do with our time? How are we going to allocate our time? What are we going to do with our scarce resources? Markets are one of those ways to allocate scarce resources, and prices are powerful incentives. One of the first things that's important to understand about markets is it's not buyers versus sellers. That was actually a definition when my children were in middle school, in their middle school textbook in the economics unit. It talked about competition, and it said buyers versus sellers in the marketplace. And nothing could be further from the truth. What actually happens in markets is buyers compete with buyers. Here's some pictures from some COVID shopping, buyers competing with buyers for toilet paper, or Costco right before it opens. Buyers are competing with buyers to get in there and get the goods first. And sellers compete with sellers. Any holiday weekend, there's always mattress sales, right? And all the mattress sellers are competing with each other for your business. Buyers compete with buyers, and sellers compete with sellers. And when a buyer and seller find a mutually agreeable price that they're willing to exchange at, it's a win-win for those two, for the buyer and the seller. Both the buyer and the seller value what they're giving up more than what they value what they're giving up, what they're getting at more than what they're giving up. So a buyer hands over the money in exchange for a good. What they're saying is, I value that good more than the money. And what the seller says is, I value that money more than the good that I'm giving. So we're going to start with the consumer side of the market. And consumers in markets make up what we call demand. And demand is willingness and ability to purchase good at various prices. So there has to be a desire. Students have to want, or consumers have to want something. And then there has to be a willingness and ability to pay for it. So they might want a fancy car, but if they aren't willing and able to pay for it, then there's no demand. They might want a phone, and if they're willing and able to pay for it, then they would have a demand for that phone. Our economic reasoning proposition number 4 is that institutions are the rules of the game that influence our choices. And so when we talk about institutions in economics, we're talking about formal and informal rules of the game that shape the incentives and influence choices that people make. So they can be things like laws, customs, traditions, codes of conduct at school, for example. These basic institutions that control behavior, they set out to establish an incentive structure and the basic design of any economic system. Markets are an institution. They're so prevalent in our society, it's hard to imagine what it would be like without markets, because we exchange so commonly in marketplaces, buyers and sellers exchange. So we're going to start out with what we call the law of demand. And the law of demand says that if price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. The quantity that people will want to buy decreases. And I always just ask my students before I dive into the graph if that sentence makes sense. Because in economics, graphs are just tools, they're pictures, and they tell a story. Our job as teachers is to make those graphs tell a story. If we can't make it tell a story, it's not going to be a useful tool for students. So we're going to do our best job to make it tell a story, but there's also a story that should make sense to students. So when prices for pizza go up, does it make sense that they would buy less pizza? And it does make sense. We could restate that in the opposite way. We could say that when prices go down, quantity demanded goes up. So when prices for pizza are fall, it's $1 a slice day. Do they buy more pizza? And students would say yes. So in this picture tells that story, this picture that we're looking at, this purple demand curve here, it's downward sloping, and it shows that at higher prices, there are lower quantities. And at lower prices, there's greater quantities. This whole thing is what we call demand. Let me get my little draw tool here. We'll use red. Okay. So, but this demand curve is made up of all of these quantities right here on the demand curve, all these little points on the demand curve. And each one of these is what we call a quantity demanded. So this whole thing, all of these quantities on the demand curve, this whole line is what we call demand. And each little point on the line is what we call a quantity demanded. This is the quantity demanded at this price. And this is the quantity demanded at this price. Sorry for my straight lines here. All right, any questions so far? Let me clear my drawings so I can figure out how to do that. There we go. All right, so there are several things that are what we call demand shifters, or things that change demand. And so I'm going to go ahead and put them all up here and then show you the demand curve again. And all of these things are things that can either increase demand, which means we shift the whole demand curve to the right. It means that at any given price, let me get my draw tool over here again. I'm out of practice. There we go. That at any given price, if this is the quantity that we would have bought before, we're now willing and able to buy a greater quantity. We would have bought this quantity before, and now we'll buy this quantity. That's the demand. That's what we call an increase in demand. And any of these things over here on the left could cause an increase in demand, or depending on the way they shift, they could cause a decrease in demand. The first category is tastes and preferences. When there's some new fad, what's a fad that students are? I know, like silly bands once upon a time was popular. I heard they're coming back, but you guys are closer connected to the students than I am. What's a fad that students are into right now? Oh, Stanley Cups. That's a good one, Media. Any others, just type them in the chat. Stanley cups, fidget spinners, okay? So if the demand for if all of a sudden influencers all have Stanley cups and the students all want Stanley cups, that's something that we would call an increase in demand. And so we would draw a whole new demand curve and we would shift it to the right, like we're seeing here. If Stanley cups become the old thing and nobody wants Stanley cups anymore, then we would actually shift the demand curve to the left when they're not the fad, when they're out. And because remember before it was what were the water bottles that they all had? Type it in the chat if you know what I'm talking about. Before Stanley cups, what were the water bottles that all the students had to have that were really pricey? Hydro flasks. Thank you, Rachel. So hydro flasks were all the rage. Hydro flasks aren't, they're still used, but as Stanley cups came in, the demand for hydro flasks decreased. And we would show that by drawing a new demand curve shifted to the left. The whole demand curve shifts to the left. At any given price, people will buy fewer than they did before, or they're willing to pay lower prices for the same quantity. There's two ways to think about that. Another shifter of demand is income. Generally, when income goes up, our demand for things goes up. And when income goes down, our demand for things goes down. That's for most goods and services. But there are some goods and services for which that is opposite. So things that when your income goes up, you buy less of those things. You can think of something like that. Go ahead and type it in the chat. Something that when your income goes up, you would buy less of this. Spam, Taryn said. Yeah. Bus passes. Craft dinner, tuna, generic products. Those are all great examples. Store brands, maybe things from a thrift shop, mac and cheese, Top Ramen, somebody said. These are things that when your income goes up, you buy less of these things. And we have a name for those. We call those inferior goods. So inferior goods they vary per person. For example, my income is higher than it's ever been, but I buy more Top Ramen than I've ever bought. But for some of you, that may be different. Now it's because I have young adults, living in my house and they like Top Ramen. But that doesn't mean Top Ramen isn't an inferior good. It probably is for most people, just not for everybody. Normal goods are those things that when our income goes up, our demand goes up. Tickets to the movies, eating out at restaurants. Generally, the more money we make, the more we're willing to go out to eat. That would be an example of a normal good. Another category or shifter of demand is what we call prices of related goods. And we put these in categories of complements and substitutes. So complements are goods that are commonly used together. Go ahead and give me some complements in the chat. Oh, good. Rachel said peanut butter and jelly, bacon and eggs. What else? Hamburgers and hamburger buns, chips and soda, ham and cheese, spaghetti and spaghetti sauce, fries and ketchup, baseball and baseball bat. These are great examples. Whiskey and ice, that's teacher example. Milk and what else? What goes with milk? Milk and cookies, good. Milk and cereal, those are all examples of complements. And so what happens is when the price of let's use hamburger and hamburger buns, when hamburgers are on sale and the price goes down, what do you think happens to the demand for hamburger buns? Does it go up or down? Give me thumbs up or thumbs down. It go increase in demand. If hamburgers are on sale and the price goes down, the demand for hamburger buns is going to go up because people are going to need more hamburger buns to go with those. So that would actually be an increase in demand, a shift of the demand curve to the right. Substitutes, on the other hand, are goods that are used in place of one another. So what's a substitute for milk? Go ahead and give me some substitutes for milk. A generic brand of milk, oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, somebody said, powdered milk, nothing, Park said. Milk is milk. Coconut milk, there are lots of substitutes today for milk. And so when the price of milk changes, it changes the demand for substitutes. Give me some other examples of substitutes, goods that are used in place of one another. Go ahead. Coke and Pepsi, hot dogs or hamburgers. Good job, Mallory. Keep going. Give me some more. Bagels and muffins, coffee and tea. Ground turkey and ground beef. Types of meats like ham, turkey, and chicken. Bread and bagels. Pizza and Starbucks. Good examples. Corn syrup and sugar. Let's use the example of ground turkey and ground beef or other types of meat like ham, turkey, and chicken. If chicken is on sale, so the price of chicken goes down, what's going to happen to the demand for ground beef? It's going to go down as well because more people are buying the chicken that's on sale. So the demand for ground beef is going to decrease, and that would look like this, a shift of the demand curve to the left. Another shifter of demand is what we call a change in the number of buyers in the market. So I live in Arizona in the Phoenix metro area where we get lots of what we call snowbirds, winter visitors that come here for the winter time when the weather is really nice and it's cold in the rest of the country. And they stay for just the winter. They leave when it gets really hot in Arizona. And yeah, Florida gets that too. And so what happens is in the winter time, demand goes up for things like movie tickets and meals at restaurants because there's more consumers in the market. College towns where all the students come and move in during the school year and they leave in the summer, that's a change in the number of consumers in the market. So the demand for coffee is going to go up when all the college students are in town. Change in the number of buyers in the market. We could even say the composition of buyers in the market. As our population ages, as more people are aging and we're having fewer babies, the demand for things, what are some things that elderly people use? Healthcare, the demand for healthcare would go up. Any others? Depends, there we go, mothballs. Walkers, good job. Okay, you guys are funny. All right, the last shifter of demand is a change in the expectations about what we think our future income is going to be or what we think the future price is going to be. So if you think you're going to get a raise, but you haven't gotten it yet, you might want to go out and celebrate and go out and eat at a restaurant or something. Your demand for restaurant meals might go up because you're expecting your income to go up. If you think you're going to lose your job, the opposite might happen, right? You're not going to go out and spend all that extra money on entertainment. So changes about your expectations, if your expectations change about your income, that can shift the demand curve. And the other one is expectations about the future price. If you think the price of concert tickets is going to go up in the future, what's going to happen to your demand for concert tickets right now? It's going to go up because you want to buy the tickets now before the price goes up. But if you think the price is going to fall for those concert tickets, then your demand right now decreases because you'd rather wait and buy those concert tickets when they're on sale. So these are all of the things that we call shifters of demand. And any of these things are going to cause the demand curve to move to the right or the left. If it's not one of these things, there is one other thing that's going to change, and that's what we call a change in price. I'm going to back up one slide to this slide right here. And if a change in price happens, we don't have to draw a new demand curve because we already have this demand curve. And if price changes, if price falls, goes from here to here, we don't have to draw a new demand curve. We just read that price change on this graph. Price falls, it goes from here to here, and the quantity increases. It goes from here to here. We call this kind of a change, this movement along the demand curve, We call this a change in quantity demanded. And there's only one thing that causes a change in quantity demanded, and that's a change in price. Any other change is going to be one of those shifters, and it's going to move the demand curve to the right or the left. But if it's just price that changes, we move along the demand curve. All right, clear that. Okay, we're going to do some practice here. So if you'll look at your Pear Deck slides, either on your phone or your other window that you have open, you'll see a little blue dot, and you're going to drag the dot to the correct graph. Is this movement along the demand curve, or is it shifting the demand curve to the right or the left? So up here at the top, it says the market is for peanut butter, and the event is that the price of peanut butter increases. So drag your blue dot to the side, to the graph that you think correctly represents that. The market is for peanut butter, and the price of peanut butter increases. All right, I see 24 responses. I'm going to go ahead and show your responses. All right, we have a lot of dots on both graphs, but a few more over here to the left. So let me hide your responses, and I'll show you the correct answer is the graph on the left. What is changing? Let me get my little draw tool. The market is for peanut butter, and what is changing? The price of peanut butter. And remember, I told you if price changes, we just move along the demand curve. Price of peanut butter goes from A to B. We just move along the demand curve to that new price. Does it make sense that if the price of peanut butter goes up and people were buying this quantity before, that they would buy a lower quantity today? Does that make sense? Does the story match the picture? That's what we want. We want the graph to tell a story. Okay, so remember, when price changes, we just move along the demand curve. All right, let's try another one. The market is for jelly, and the price of peanut butter increases. Okay, I see 22 responses. Drag your blue dot to the right or the left graph. Which one do you think it is? If the market is for jelly and the price of peanut butter changes. All right, I'm going to show your responses. And most of you have your dot on the right, and that is the correct answer. Now go ahead and hide. It does say price. So if you were tricked because you were like, okay, I got this. She said if the price changes, and I see price right here, but is it the price of jelly that's changing? This is something else. Which one of those categories of shifters changed? Go ahead and type it in the chat. Which one of the categories was this? What do we call that? Related goods and services, specifically complements. These are complementary goods. So it's a change in the price of a complement. And does it make sense that if the price of peanut butter increases, that people will buy less jelly at any given price to go with that? Okay, good. Here. All right, here's a new one. I'm showing responses. Let me hide them. The market is for fish, and the price of beef decreases. Go ahead and drag your blue dot to the correct graph. You will get all these slides. They're already enabled with Pear Deck. If you don't have Pear Deck, it's just an add-on that you can add to Google Slides. There's a free version for teachers that allows things like this drag and drop, multiple choice, true, false. It's pretty easy to use. Lots of YouTube videos you could watch on how to use Pear Deck. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show your responses. Okay, we have some confusion, but most of the dots are in the graph on the right. Let's find out if that's the correct answer. That is the correct answer. This is what we would call a decrease in demand. What are fish and beef to each other? What is the shifter category? Go ahead and type it in the chat. These are also related goods, but specifically substitute goods. Change in the price of a substitute. Usually people eat fish or beef, not fish and beef together, unless you're my husband who thinks there needs to be multiple meats at every meal. So in this case, if the price of beef decreases, does it make sense that the demand for fish will go down this week because more people will be buying beef that's on sale? That's the story that goes with this picture of this decrease in demand. All right, here's one with just words, no graph. Let's see if you can get the correct words to match this story. Assume the price of Pepsi decreases. Which of these would be true? A, B, C, or D? Go ahead and type it in choose your answer in Pear Deck on your phone or your other window. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show responses. And most of you said C. The correct answer is, in fact, C. What is changing? We're talking about the market for Pepsi. All of these say the demand for Pepsi, the quantity demanded for Pepsi. All of these are talking about Pepsi. And what changed? The price of Pepsi. We don't need a whole new demand curve. We're not changing demand. So we know it's going to be C or D, a change in quantity demanded. And remember, the law of demand says that when price goes down, people buy more. So that it's an increase in what we call quantity demanded. All right, let's assume the market is still for Pepsi, but let's assume that the price of Coke decreases. Somebody said Pear Deck is glitching. Hopefully that'll clear up. Go ahead and put your answer in. See what we have. Most of our answers. Okay, we have a tie between B and D. Maybe a couple more for D. Let's see what the correct answer is. The correct answer is B. Is the price of Pepsi changing this time? The price of Pepsi isn't changing. What is changing? Go ahead and type in what we call the shifter. What's making the demand curve shift? We call this a decrease in demand. The demand would shift to the left. So on your in the Google or the Zoom chat, what did we call this? Change in the price of a substitute. The price of Coke and Pepsi being substitutes for one another, there's a change in the price of a substitute. And does it make sense that if all the Coke products are on sale, that the demand for Pepsi would decrease because people are buying more Coke products this week? All right. Are we ready to move on, or do we have any questions? I think Tanya said there's no substitute for Pepsi. Go ahead and drag your blue dot if you're, tell me how confident you're feeling to move on. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. Okay, looks like if people are feeling good, we're ready to move on. So we're going to do the supply side of the market now. And if demand was the willingness and ability of consumers to purchase goods at every price, supply is the willingness and ability of producers to sell various quantities of goods and services at all the various prices. So there has to be a willingness and an ability. So things like driving for Uber Eats, picking up meals and delivering them to people. I usually try to give my students examples of things that they could actually be a supplier of. So in high school, they could babysit. They could mow lawns, things that they could supply, and ask them, about so when we get to the law of supply, they can put themselves in the shoes of a supplier. It's easy to think about consumers because we're all consumers every day. So it's easy to put ourselves in the shoes of a consumer. It's a little bit harder to put ourselves in the shoes of a seller or a producer. So how many hours, this is something students could do, they could hold a sign on a street corner. So could you, right? What if I said FTE was hiring people to hold a sign to promote the economics for leaders, summer camps, and you just had to stand on a corner and hold a sign. In the next 24 hours, how many hours would you supply to me? How many would you sell? Oh, good. Somebody's already asking, well, what are you paying? What's the wage? What if the wage was $10 an hour? Go ahead and drag your blue dot to how many hours you would supply it. $10 an hour. A lot of people are at 0. Oh, some of you are so nice. You would give me 6 hours. Lots at 0. Okay. What if the wage was, let's say $20 an hour? Okay, I see some going up. Somebody would work 24 hours for 20 bucks an hour. That means it is the weekend. You don't have to call and get a sub. Tanya says 4 in the chat. Okay, what if the wage was $50 an hour? $50 an hour. We still have some people at 0. One person still at 0. What if the wage was $100 an hour? $100 an hour. How many hours would you sell to me? Okay, some of you are saying, I'll work all 24 hours. I'll go without sleep. Make 2,400 bucks in one day. 24 hours. What's happening as the price goes up? What's happening to the quantity of hours supplied? It's increasing. Good. It goes up. And not demand, we would say supply this time. Supply goes up. And so or more specifically, the quantity supplied goes up. As the price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. All right. Good job. So this is what supply looks like. It's opposite from demand. It's upward sloping. And it shows at all the different prices, the quantities that would be supplied. And you'll notice an upward or a positive relationship that when price goes up, the quantity supplied goes up. And when price goes down, the quantity supplied goes down. It's a direct relationship. Does that make sense? When I raised the price, you supplied more hours. When the price was lower, you were willing to supply fewer hours. So this is the picture that tells that story. It's an upward sloping supply curve. These are the shifters, the things that can, let me back up. When price changes, we just move from one point to another on this supply curve. Price was here before, and this is the new price. We just move from one quantity to the new quantity. When price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. We call this a change in quantity supplied. Just like we did with a change in quantity demanded. When the price changes, we just move along the supply curve. Okay, anything else that changes that's going to cause a change in supply is going to shift the whole supply curve to the left or to the right. And that's what we're going to look at next. These are the categories that can shift the supply curve to the right or the left. The first one is input prices. So inputs for, if you are making, let's say you're going to start a company making cookies and selling cookies at school. What are some of the inputs to cookies? Go ahead and type it in the Zoom chat. Inputs for cookies. Sugar, butter, chocolate chips. Good. Flour. Awesome. What if the price of sugar goes up? What's going to happen to the quantity of cookies you're going to be willing and able to sell at every given price? It's going to decrease. It's going to go down. So that would look like this, a shift of the supply curve to the left because input prices went up. And when input prices go down, when your ingredients are cheaper and chocolate chips are on sale and sugar is less expensive, you're going to be willing to supply more cookies at every given price. Another shifter of supply is what we call technology or productivity. So if you were able to get a new oven, a flash bake oven that you put the cookies in, it cooks the cookies in 5 minutes. Are you going to be willing to sell more or fewer cookies at every given price? Good, more, increase. That would look like this. A shift of the supply curve to the right, that at any given price, you would sell a greater quantity of cookies than before because you have this new technology. You're more productive now when you're making cookies. Another shifter of supply is government taxes and subsidies. And they work just like you'd expect. If the government put a tax on cookies, $1 tax on every cookie, what's going to happen to the price? If you were selling cookies for $2 before, what's going to happen now? You'd have to increase the price, somebody said. So let me show you on this graph what that looks like. Oops, there we go. If this is the quantity of cookies and this is the price you would have sold before, now for that same quantity of cookies, you would be willing to sell that same quantity, but only if you could do it at a higher price. That's one way to read this supply curve and a good way to think about what it looks like for taxes. But we can also read the supply curve like this, that at this same price before, whoops, we're doing decrease right now. Let me clear. There we go, decrease. I'm drawing back. So before, if we were willing to sell this quantity of cookies at this price, now to sell them at the same price, we would only be willing to sell a smaller quantity of cookies. Both of those are the correct way to read this decrease in supply. But a tax means that producers will sell less. And a subsidy means that they'll sell more. If the government put a subsidy, that means they would pay you $1 for every cookie that you sold. And maybe they want everybody to be happy before the election. And so they put $1 subsidy on these comfort foods, on these chocolate chip cookies. And so now, whoops, this would be an increase in supply with a subsidy. Another shifter of supply is a change in the number of sellers in the market. So when new coffee shops open up and there's more coffee shops in town, we would expect that at any given price, there would be a greater quantity of coffee, cups of coffee available. Or another way to think about that would be that at any given quantity, they would be willing to sell coffee at a lower price with more competition. And the last shifter of supply is what we call expectations about the future price of the product. So if you're a seller, think about it like a seller. If you think, let me think of something students have to sell. If students have phones, and if they think the price of their phone is going to go up in the future, what's going to happen to how many phones are going to be offered for sale today? Go ahead and type it in the chat. They think the price is going to go up in the future. What's going to happen to phones today, the supply of phones? It'll decrease because they want to hold on to that phone and they want to put it on the market when the price is higher. Good. If you think the price of something is going to go up, down in the future, then what happens today? What do you want to do with your phone today? You want to sell it today, and so that would increase the supply of cell phones on the market today. All right, let's do some practice. Here's the market for candy. Think like a seller, and the price of sugar falls. Which graph correctly shows this? Go ahead and drag your blue dot to the correct graph. If you're not connected to Pear Deck, you can type it in the Google or in the Zoom chat. You could say the right graph or the left graph. All right, let's show responses. Okay, we have some dots on the left graph and some on the right. I do see the word price here. Remember we said if the price changes, we move along the curve, but is it the price of candy that's changing? It's not the price of candy. This is, it's the price of something else. What do we call that shifter? For supply. We just went through the list of supply shifters. What do we call this? An input. Change in the price of input or resources or factors of production. Good. And when the price of sugar falls, here are my drawings. Does it make sense that they would be willing and able to sell more candy at every given price? An increase in supply or a shift to the right. All right, here's the next one. The market is for bread and the price of bread rises. All right, I'm going to go ahead and show responses. And awesome. And you saw it's the price that's changing and it's the price of bread. And so we move along the supply curve. We move, in this case, we were moving up along the supply curve to a higher price. Does it make sense that if the price of bread goes up, bread producers will want to sell more bread? Remember when there was a big cupcake fad and all these cupcake shops were opening up? People are selling cupcakes for $5, $10 a piece. When the price of cupcakes went up, more cupcakes were supplied, an increase in quantity supplied. We just move along the supply curve. All right, here's just words, no graph. Assume that the price of cheese decreases. What will happen in the pizza market? What are the words that correctly describe that? Okay, I'm going to show responses. And we have some variety. The most common response was C, but we have a lot of people saying A. So let's take a look. The correct answer was A. Most people missed this question. So is the price of pizza changing? Or is it something else? It's something else. It's the price of cheese. But the market we're talking about is pizza. The price of pizza hasn't changed, but what's changing is the price of an input. And remember, when input prices go down, sellers are willing to sell more of that good. So supply would increase or shift to the right. This is a shifter of supply. When we put supply and demand together, there's one place where they intersect, and that's the magical place that we call equilibrium. Now, it looks kind of like a target when we're looking at this graph right here, that if you could just find equilibrium, all will be well. But the truth is, in markets, supply is always shifting and demand is always shifting, and that equilibrium is a moving target. It's like if you have a big silver bowl and a ball in that bowl and it's rolling around, it's always trying to move to the bottom of the bowl. It's trying to reach equilibrium. Markets are always trying to reach equilibrium. Something changes, the equilibrium changes, and prices adjust and move towards that equilibrium price. And so now we can think about our changes in supply and demand, and they change the equilibrium price. If there was an increase in demand, price used to be, the equilibrium price used to be here. Now where supply and demand intersect is up here. Does that make sense that if demand increases, that there would be a higher price for that good and more of that good would be sold in the market? This is the Stanley Cup example. Does it make sense that if the demand for Stanley Cups goes up, that the price goes up and more will be sold? This is the picture that tells that story. We could have a decrease in supply. This would be like an example of a change in input prices. Input prices going down. So, no, this is decrease in supply. Your input prices go up. So flour is more expensive. And if this is the market for cookies, there would be a decrease in the supply. Here was our old equilibrium. We now have to find the new equilibrium, the new place where they intersect. And it's at a higher price and a lower quantity. Does the story match the picture? Does it make sense that if the price of flour goes up, that the price of cookies would go up and fewer would be sold in the marketplace? That's the story that matches the picture. Okay, so we're going to practice. Oh, this is how we would write equilibrium as an equation. We would say equilibrium happens where quantity demanded equals quantity supplied. The price at which the amount that quantity that people are willing and able to buy and sell equals the quantity that producers are willing and able to sell. There's not too much in the market and there's not too little in the market. All right, this is an interactive slide that you can draw on. So I'm going to give you a scenario and I want you to draw the new curve. Draw whether it's a new demand curve or a new supply curve and whether that new demand or supply shifts to the right or to the left, okay? All right, it's the market for, it's the market for movie tickets and there's more senior citizens in town. That sound like something that's affecting consumers? Is that changing the consumer side of the market or the producer side of the market? There's more senior citizens in town. What's going to happen to the demand for, what's going to happen in the market for movie tickets? Let me show responses. Oh, we're going to stack them like this. Okay, I can see most of you shifted demand to the right. I see some interesting things on the graph, but it looks like most of you drew new lines or demand curves to the right. And that is in fact what it would look like. It would be a new demand curve over here to the right. And now here's our old equilibrium and here's our new equilibrium. Did we move on the supply curve? Did we move on the supply curve? So here's the upward sloping supply curve. Did we move from one point to the other point on the supply curve? We did. So notice that this increase in demand raised the price. Here's the new price. It raised the price and more are being sold in the marketplace. But at that higher price, what do sellers do? Sellers sell more. We didn't have to draw a new supply curve to do that. This increase in price just moved us up along the supply curve to that new equilibrium price. So it's an increase in demand, and that increase in demand causes price to go up. What do higher prices tell sellers? They tell sellers to sell more. Okay, let's try another one. Go ahead and clear your drawing. You can clear your drawing. Let's do another one. This is the market for soda pop, whatever you call it in your community. And the government puts a tax on soda pop. This actually happened in some communities years ago. They were doing a sin tax on soda pop? Government puts a tax on soda pop. The sellers have to pay the tax. Okay, I see two prominent shifts. I see a lot of curves that are supply shifted to the left, and I see a lot of demand shifts to the left. Because this is hide responses, go back to a slide really quick. If we go back to these supply shifters, remember these categories of things that shift supply? One of them was taxes and subsidies. When those taxes and subsidies are put on the sellers, it shifts the supply curve. And if it's a tax, it shifts it to the left. So the correct answer, whoops, over there. Doesn't want to let me shift there. Let me go this way. There we go. Okay, so the correct answer is everybody that shifted supply curve to the left, like this, that would be the correct answer. And notice that that supply curve doesn't make sense that it would cause the price of soda to go up and that fewer soda pops would be purchased. And we also moved along the demand curve. So we call that a change in quantity demanded. But it was caused by this decrease in supply shifting to the left, which caused price to go up. And at higher prices, people will buy less soda. All right, let's see. We'll do one more practice and then we'll move on. Let's do, this is the market for fish, market for fish. And there's a new technology that allows them to catch more fish in every net. So ask yourself, is that one of the shifters of supply or is it one of the shifters of demand? New technology that allows them to catch more fish in every net. Okay, it looks like most of you are shifting supply, which is correct, but it would actually increase the supply, which is a shift to the right. So if you shifted supply this way, supply shifting to the right, we call that an increase in supply. Even though it looks like supply is moving down, this is why it's important to say right and left. Supply shifted to the right, which is what we call an increase in supply. Shifts to the right are always an increase, and shifts to the left are always a decrease. All right, if the price is too high, like the government just sets a price and the price is too high, like this, the market is not in equilibrium. The quantity supplied and is greater than the quantity demanded, and we get, what does that sound like if there's too much supplied and nobody wants to buy it? Good, this is what we call a surplus. So when prices are too high, there's surpluses of goods and services, and normally what happens is there's downward pressure on price until that surplus disappears. The market moves towards equilibrium to clear that surplus. When prices are too low, we get the opposite. Lots of buyers want to buy, but sellers only want to sell a small quantity. Buyers want to buy a large quantity, and we call that a shortage. When there's a shortage, there's upward pressure on price. So, and as price goes up, sellers sell more, buyers buy less, and it moves the market towards equilibrium until there's just enough for all the buyers that are willing and able to buy can buy what the sellers are willing and able to sell. The shortage disappears. when we think about all these four different shifts, either an increase in demand, one on the far left, or an increase in supply, or a decrease in demand, or a decrease in supply, these are the four possible shifts that happen and what happens to equilibrium. So I usually like to give my students a reference like this, just so they have all the four possible shifts. The truth is, in real markets, you can get both things shifting at the same time. But when you start out teaching markets, it's important to keep it simple and just start with one shift at a time. What happens when demand increases? These are the pictures that tell the story of these letters down below. When demand increases, price goes up and the equilibrium quantity goes up. And then you ask yourself, come up with a story. Does the story match the picture? If there's a new fad for silly bands come back, does it make sense that the price of silly bands would go up and more would be sold in the marketplace? That's an increase in demand. Here's the picture that matches the story. Increase in supply shifts to the right. We go from this price to this price. It's a lower price and a greater quantity. Does it make sense if there's more sellers in the market, more sellers move in and open up and start selling coffee, for example, that the price would come down and more would be offered for sale? This is the picture that tells this story below. Decrease in demand shifts to the left, price comes down, quantity goes down. So when demand falls for Disneyland tickets, price goes down, fewer are sold. And when supply decreases, during COVID-19, when all the computer chips, there was a shortage of computer chips, they weren't able to produce as many cars. And so the price for cars went up and fewer were sold in the marketplace. And that was caused by a decrease in supply. Okay, any questions before we move on? All right, here's a practice. You can draw on this slide. What will happen to the supply, the demand, and the price for gasoline if U.S. Congress passes a law that sets a maximum price at $1 per gallon? Let's be realistic. What's the price for gas right now? $4 a gallon? I'll put a 4 there. What happens if the government passes a law that sets the maximum price at $1 per gallon? What would that look like in this market? Yeah, some people not answering yet. This is a tricky question. Let's see what our answers look like. Okay, we got lots of here. I see a lot of demand increases. I see a couple supply decreases. I see a whole bunch of people drawing a line down here at the bottom. So let me look at some individual responses. We'll look at this one right here. Maybe I can make that bigger. This is a correct answer. The supply didn't change, the demand didn't change. There's just a new price. Government set a maximum price, and they set that price at $1. And if they set it at $1, you get these new, at $1, here's the quantity demanded. People want to buy a lot of gas, but sellers don't want to sell that much gas. What do we call that when the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied? Go ahead and type it in the Zoom chat. Shortage. We call that a shortage. And because anytime the government sets a price, a legal price, in this case, we call it a price ceiling because the price isn't allowed to rise above $1. When the government sets price ceilings, they create permanent shortages. The market can't naturally adjust to make that shortage disappear because it's a law that caps the price at $1. When the government sets prices that are too high, it does the opposite. It creates a quantity supplied that's greater than a quantity demanded, it creates a permanent surplus. And then the price isn't allowed to fall below that. This happens with like price supports for agricultural goods. If they set the price artificially high at $3 a bushel when it's normally $2 a bushel, we end up with a permanent surplus of goods and services. They did this with cheese when I was a kid, and there was a huge surplus of cheese, and the government bought up all this cheese and was giving it out to people to try to get rid of their surplus of government cheese. I did grow up on government cheese. All right, let's go. Correct answer. All right, so remember the institutions that make this possible, that make markets work, are property rights. You have to be able to own that thing that you are selling, or else why would you, you can't sell it in the first place. And same thing for consumers. They have to know that what they're paying for is going to belong to them. And having rules that you can't just steal from somebody are also important. These things make markets work well. All right. I'm going to go ahead. We're going to play a game when you come back. We're going to take let's do a 12-minute break. So we'll come back at 10 o'clock. Okay. And when you come back, we're going to be in groups. So we're going to be playing a markets in action game. All right. Welcome back, everybody. Go ahead and turn your cameras on so I know that you're here. I'm going to share my screen again. And this is the slide deck from the last session that we just did. But I want you to notice that in the notes of the slide, I'll drag it up so you can see the notes down here. There's a link to the lesson on the FT website. We have a brand new website, and the curriculum part of the website is still in progress. So sometimes when you're searching for lessons, it's not easy to find things. So I made sure I put the link directly to the lesson so that you have the lesson outline that goes with the slides that we just did. So you have that in the notes of the slide, and I'll share these slides at the end of our session today. So now we're going to switch over and we're going to do an activity called Markets in Action. And I need you to connect again to Pear Deck. So go ahead and do that before I send you away to groups. You're going to go to joinpd.com and enter these new letters.
Do you have direct links to the Pear Deck? Because every time I go to get in, it tells you I need to log in. It won't let me in.
Yeah,
I don't have an account.
It should do that. It should. Let me make sure.
I've never had this happen before, but they keep saying I need
I have it set so you don't, so that it's just anonymous. But if you have a Google account, just choose one of those Google accounts.
Okay, I'll try that. Thanks.
And the code is on my screen that I'm sharing right now. Here's the code for Join PD today. It's OODKAT. Bill's got a banana eater next to him. I didn't get a banana today. All right, it looks like we have 23 of you connected. Let me see how many people are here. We got 33 in the room.
Debbie, I'm not able to connect because I don't have another device.
That's okay. You're going to be in a group, and in the group, at least one person needs to connect to submit the answers for everybody.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the class, and Debbie Davis is going to get breakout rooms ready. Don't send them away yet, but go ahead and put 4 people in a breakout room, Debbie. And here's the rules of the game. You're going to be assigned to a group of 4 people. And when you get there, make sure your camera's on and turn your microphone on so you can talk through these problems. And in the breakout rooms, I'll share my slides so you'll see the question in the breakout room. but you can also see it on Pear Deck as well. And your job is to work as a group to answer the question correctly. Every correct question is worth a positive point, 1 point, and each incorrect answer is worth a negative point. Every team must play every round. There's no dropouts. If you don't answer, you just automatically lose the point. So you might as well try your best to come up with an answer. And I'm the judge, and my decision is final on who gets a point or not. What are you playing for? You're playing for status this time. Let's see here. Okay, here's round one. I'm gonna show you the question first, and then I'm gonna send you away into your groups, okay? So insufficient rains in India have resulted in several years of poor harvest of chickpeas, which is the main ingredient in hummus. The country, by far the world's largest producer of chickpeas, mostly grows the legume for domestic consumption. But worse than expected harvest means that it has had to buy more chickpeas from growers elsewhere, putting pressure on suppliers worldwide. So your job is to use a supply and demand graph to explain what happened to the quantity of chickpeas. So you can use supply and demand, but then you're just going to answer A, B, C, or D. And when you answer, I want you to do it like this yellow bubble right here. So choose a team captain when you get in your group, and you're going to submit your answer by putting team 1 or team 2 or team 3, and then your answer. Is it A, B, C, or D? Now, how do you know what team number you are? It's what breakout room you're sent to. So if you're sent to breakout room 1, you're team 1. If you're sent to breakout room 2, you're team 2, etc. Okay? If you have questions while you're working on the problem, just raise your hand and I can drop in, but you won't have, I'll give you 4 minutes in the breakout room to talk through this and put an answer in, okay? Only one person has to submit for your group. Okay, go ahead and send them away, Debbie. Okay, it looks like everybody's back. Here's your answers, and it looks like every team, thank you for putting team 7 or team 1 in front of your answer. And we're waiting for team 3, but I see these other answers that don't say a team, all or B anyway. So everybody gets a point this time. Everybody starts off with a point. The correct answer is B, supply decreased of chickpeas, which causes price to go up and quantity to go down. So that was the correct answer. All right. There it is. And here's the second question. Same scenario. Hummus has grown in popularity in the UK. Chickpeas are the major ingredient for hummus. Predict what subsequently happened in the British market for hummus. Okay, I'm going to send you back to your groups. Welcome back. This time we have some teams answered C, some teams answered A, and some teams answered B. We have 2 each of those. I see team 1, 2. I don't see team 3's answer. Where's team 3's answer? I see 4. Do I see team 5? I see team 5, 6, 7, and 8. Team 3, you can type it in the Zoom chat if you weren't able to put your answer. I'm still sharing my screen, right, Debbie?
Yes.
Okay, you guys can see that. All right. Okay, with the exception of team 3, who doesn't have an answer, we have 2 A's, 2 B's, and 2 C's. This relates to the last question, what we know about happened in the last question. And I'm going to go back 1 second. In this one, we learned that supply decreased for chickpeas because there was a low harvest that year, and it caused price to go up and quantity to go down. So we know the price of chickpeas increased. So here, the correct answer is A. So the 2 teams that said A, give yourself a point. And if you said B or C, take away a point. That puts you at 0. Set my timer here. So let's connect this and say, why is A the correct answer? Because the price of chickpeas went up, chickpeas are an input to hummus. And so when input prices go up, supply decreases. The supply of hummus decreased because the cost of production increased. That's the only one of these that can be a correct answer. It does say that hummus grew in popularity in the UK. So if one of these had said the demand for hummus increased, that would have also been a correct answer, but that wasn't an option. Any questions about this one? Okay, it was a little bit tricky. We're still dealing with the same hummus scenario, and we have one more question. Which is not a predictable response to the drought in India? Okay, we're going to go ahead and send you back to your breakout rooms and see if you can answer this one. All right, welcome back. I'm missing team 3 and 4. I have a letter C right here, but it doesn't say a team in front of it. If that's yours, go ahead and edit it to put team 3 or team 4 in front of that. For those that answered, we have D's and we have 2 C's. Let's find out what the correct answer is. Correct answer is D. If the price of chickpeas goes up in India because of the poor harvest, does it make sense that they'll import more foreign chickpeas? That one, it would be more. If it said more chickpeas, it would be correct, not less chickpeas. Consumers will look for substitutes because the price of chickpeas went up, and so consumers will switch to other substitutes if available. Remember, when prices go up, it tells sellers to sell more. So as chickpea prices go up, U.S. farmers will plant more chickpeas. And when prices are higher, it also tells sellers to producers to solve problems, to find alternatives. And so it makes sense that it would create an incentive for scientists from Scotland and Ethiopia to explore development of drought-resistant chickpeas. Okay, so that's 1 point if you said D, minus 1 point if you said C. We're now going to go to round 2. When I do this with students, I like to give them tickets. And so they start every round with 3 tickets. And then I take a ticket away if they get the question wrong, and they get to keep their ticket if they get the question right. All right, here's the question. What will happen to the supply, the demand, and the price of gasoline in the U.S. if Congress passes a law that sets the maximum price at $1.50 per gallon? You have to illustrate your answer with a graph. So you have to draw on this one. Choose one person for your team to illustrate that on Pear Deck and include your team name somewhere on your answer. Okay, so you're going to draw a supply and demand graph and show what it would look like if the government set the maximum price of gasoline at $1.50 per gallon. Go ahead and send them away, Debbie. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Go ahead and lock the screens. Lots of mess. We'll look at it this way. Okay, this is team 8, and they have, I see supply and demand. I see this red line, which would be a price control below equilibrium, but I also see a decrease in supply. And the correct answer is a price control below equilibrium. That red line is correct. We don't need a decrease in supply, though. At that lower price, that's where the decrease in supply comes from. Let me get my little annotate tool from. Notice that at this lower price, there is a decrease in supply. We don't have to draw a supply curve to the left to show that. So what should we say for team 8? We won't take a point from you or give you a point. You'll just be even on that one. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's see, in the way we'll go here. This is team, I think it must be team 7, has a big 7 there. And they have a demand curve and a supply curve and a price drawn in below equilibrium. That is correct, plus 1 point for team 7. And here's team, what is that? Team 1. If you recognize this graph, okay, team 1, I see supply and demand and a price control drawn in there below equilibrium. Good job. You get a point. What team is this? Call it out if this is yours. Oh, somebody said team 6 for this one. This is a correct graph, plus 1 point. You have a supply and a demand curve. and a price control drawn in below equilibrium. This one, that's tricky. It's hard to, it looks like the price control is drawn in at equilibrium. So I see Kristen was worried that they could see everybody's page when they're drawing. So she's worried that all her students would just copy each other. Kristen, can you unmute? When you guys were drawing, could you see other people's pages?
Yeah. We all
Good.
commented in team 5. We're like, oh, this isn't good. I wonder if everybody knows everybody can see everybody's stuff.
Oh,
I just know my kids would copy whoever did it first. So
you know what? You're right. And you know what I was using? I was doing show responses while you guys were in the breakout rooms. So you can control that by not showing the responses.
okay, I was just curious. I'm like, I know my kids would be like, oh yeah, that looks right.
Yeah, good point. On the next time when you guys go in, I won't show the responses, okay?
Okay. Not that any of us would cheat, but I know my kids would. So
yeah. Okay, I don't know what to give this one. It looks like the price control might be below equilibrium because the line's so big, it's tough to tell. So if this is your graph, we'll call it 0. We'll call it even. We won't take a point away from you. I'm not sure what team this is. This team that put a smiley face. If you recognize this one, you get +1 point. They have it's not labeled, but I see the upward sloping supply curve, the downward sloping demand curve, and a price control drawn in there below equilibrium. Team 2 will give you a point as well, even though we're missing our labels most of you are missing some labels, but correctly labeled, this would be price on this axis, quantity on this axis, this is the supply curve, this is the demand curve, and this would be $1.50, the price drawn in at $1.50. All right, let's scroll down, see if we have another one. This is team 4. They do have a price control, but without supply and demand, we don't know if this is too high or too low. We don't know if it's a price ceiling or a price floor. And so we'll just call it 0. No, we won't take a point away for team 4 because you do have a price control drawn in there. We just need supply and demand to go with it. And same thing for this team. We won't take a point away. We just need supply as well. You have demand. We need supply drawn in there as well. All right, not bad. Let's hide responses. This would be a correct graph. All right, here's a new one. States minimum wage. As of May 2024, there were 31 states that have a minimum wage higher than the federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour. Washington has the highest minimum wage at $17 an hour, and California is close behind at $16 an hour. That's your background information. The purpose of minimum wage legislation is to make employers pay more than they would otherwise. That is, more than they would in an open market. Which of the following should we expect to happen when the minimum wage is set above the prevailing wage that occurs in the labor market? Go ahead and send them away, Debbie. Come back. Go ahead and look at our answers. And we've got 4 teams answering. I see C. Everybody answered C. And the correct answer is C. Good job. You found the correct words, the language of markets, to describe what's happening here. And as the price goes up, we set a higher price, the minimum wage. That's actually a price floor that keeps the price from dropping to equilibrium. And when the price is too high, we end up with a surplus. In this case, a surplus of labor. The quantity supplied of labor is greater. More people want to get those high-paying jobs, but the quantity demanded is lower. And the quantity demanded is how many would actually be employed. So if you end up with fewer people employed at the higher price. Any questions about that before we move on from minimum wage? Sometimes minimum wages are set like $7.25, for example. If there was a business in my community that tried to hire somebody at $7.25 an hour, okay, suppose, whoops, I missed this one. Suppose the minimum wage is increased. Uh-oh. but it's okay, you better get this one right, but it's below the prevailing wage in the labor market. What would you expect to happen in this situation? All right, we're going to send you away. All right, so we have A, we have some B's, and we have some D's. And let's go ahead and look at our answers here. This is a process of elimination. The correct answer is D. So if you chose D, give yourself a point. If you chose something else, take a point away. Let me draw a little graph here. Here's supply. Here's demand. Here's the price, which we would call the wage, and here's the quantity. And the minimum wage is set below the prevailing wage. So here's the prevailing wage, the market equilibrium wage, and here's the minimum wage. But the minimum wage, we'll call this MW, it's a law that says the price can't fall below this, but the price is already up here. It's already allocated at a higher price than that. So it's not going to change the quantity demanded of labor demanded, because the price will go, the market, the labor will go for this higher price. And so sellers of labor will like to sell this at this higher price. This is what we call a non-binding minimum wage. It's a law that has no impact because it says the price can't fall below this, but the price is already above it, so it has no impact. Many new firms will succeed in hiring new employees at the minimum wage. They aren't going to be able to find employees at this minimum wage because the market is already allocating labor at this higher wage. So why would somebody take a job for a lower wage when everybody who wants a job can find a job at the higher wage? It won't cause people to seek jobs overseas because the prevailing wage is high here. It doesn't matter what that minimum wage is. It's not binding, but it will attract low-paid, unskilled workers who are outside of the United States, where this wage is higher than what they make in their country. That would draw immigrants into the country looking for legal work. All right, that was a tough one. If raising the minimum wage to $7.25 an hour is a good idea, why doesn't Congress make it a better idea and raise it to 20 or even 100? Come back. Go ahead and take a look at your responses. I see some C's and some D's and a B. And the correct answer is D. Higher wages will eventually increase unemployment. Let's talk through number A, a $20 minimum wage. The higher the wage, the fewer people get employed. Let's just draw that little graph one more time. Here's price and quantity. Here's supply and demand. And if a minimum wage is, whoops, how do I undo? Oh, I only know how to undo the one thing. We'll try it one more time. Supply, demand. Okay, here's minimum wage. At this minimum wage, this is how many people are supplying their labor who say, I want to do that job. But employers are the demanders of labor, and there's a lower quantity demanded. This creates a surplus of labor. The only people that will get hired is this lower quantity right here. That's a lower quantity than if the market were able to just find equilibrium. So it's not going to add more money to the economy. Too many people would enter the labor market and find jobs. That's the part that's not true. So we can eliminate that one. At these wage rates, people wouldn't go to college and there would be shortages of skilled labor. The problem is at this higher minimum wage right here, I'll put MW at this for the price. At the higher minimum wage, you've got a big quantity supply, lots of people competing for just this few number of jobs right here. So how do you make sure you get that job? You're more skilled than somebody else. That actually the people with college degrees and experience and the most skilled people are the ones that are going to get hired. If you tell McDonald's they have to pay $20 an hour, they'll pay $20 an hour. Like they're going to get the most skilled, best, qualified, most experienced worker they can get for that $20. And the people at the very bottom, the least skilled entry-level workers, those are the ones that are going to have a hard time finding a job. And those are the ones that will be unemployed. So that's minimum wage ends up helping people with more skills and more experience, not necessarily the people that we intended to help with that law. All right, let's try round 3. We'll do maybe one question of round 3. What is the effect of restrictions on banana length and weight? So the European Union basically says we will only import bananas if they're, beautiful bananas. They have to be X inches long and they have to be heavy bananas. And so what impact does that have on the market for bananas in the European Union? And you're just going to type or write your answer out. Type it out. There's a text option. Okay, send them. Let's see. We have 5 minutes. Actually, I don't want to keep you over. So what we're going to do, who thinks they know the answer to this? Just unmute your microphone. Type it in the chat. What would that cause to happen in the European Union in the market for bananas? It would drive prices up. Thank you, Carrie. You're exactly right. And so why would the European Union want to drive prices up for their own consumers? Who benefits from that? Any ideas?
The European Union.
Who in the European Union? Consumers are going to have to pay higher prices for bananas. Matt
The
Walsh
government.
said the government, they're not, unless they're consuming the bananas.
It would be domestic producers.
Thank you, Justin said, and somebody else in the chat, Matt Walsh said that.
I guess that's the farmer, right?
People who produce other fruit that's a substitute for bananas. If you produce apples in the European Union, you're going to like it if prices of bananas go up, because then more people would buy your apples. So local producers would be behind.
That makes sense.
Good job. All right, I'm going to go ahead and skip through these last questions that all have to do with those the banana market in the European Union. And here is the QR code or the link, and Debbie Davis is also going to put it in the chat. This is the QR code for the slides and the link to the slides. I'm going to close this presentation, and I'll put it in there for you too. Oops.
I put it in the chat, Debbie.
Oh, you found it? Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, there's the code, and that takes you to a slide. I can't get up here. There we go. It takes you to a Google folder like this that has lesson 1, the stuff we did in the first lesson, and then lesson 2, the markets in action game. You can plug in your own questions, make them a little bit easier. I made them tougher because you guys are teachers and some of you have a lot of econ experience. But when you're doing this with students, you don't have to use Pear Deck. When we do it at EFL camps, a lot of times we just have the students work in teams and they answer on paper. And then I go around and judge and, look at their answer and tell them they get to keep their ticket or they lose their ticket. So you can just do it with paper. When I taught high school, I had a set of whiteboards, and I have them in the college classroom as well, like desk-sized whiteboards that the students would use, and they would hold their answers up with the whiteboards. And so that's a good solution as well. But if you do teach online, now you have a resource that you can use online as well. Some of our summer instructors do use Pear Deck because it's easy to see all the student answers in one place and judge that way as well. Thank you for giving up part of your Saturday, and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Thank you for being with us here today. We'll see you guys at the next workshop.